Four-part chords represent another layer of density past the triad being the root, the third, and the fifth. The four-part chord adding a seventh to that stack. That seventh has a different personality, so the chord has a more sophisticated sound. I did a video here on how to use triads to alter those triads to turn them into sort of proxy four-part chords. In that video, we either used the root or the fifth to remove from the chord and replace it with a seven. That gave us a way to play these chords anywhere in the neck. Super flexible. There's another method by which to get these sort of proxy four-part chords using just three voicings, and that is using the E and the A string as a way to plant the root. So these voicings will always have a root, and that root will either be on the E and the A string, so they function just like bar chords do, which makes them easy to find and very, very flexible and easy to deploy. Hey, welcome back to the channel. My name's Chris. Today you will learn about kernel chords. I think that name's a little unfortunate. I attended a music conservatory in Los Angeles, a jazz music school, and when I learned these voicings, that's what they were referred to. I haven't found a lot of evidence that that nomenclature is very widely used, so I feel like it's maybe sort of dogmatic, from the school that I came from. So I'm not going to use that name very much, but I just needed you to know that that's what they were called when I learned them. These, again, are root on the E and the A string, so that it's a bit of a different mechanism than those altered triads. And these chords really lend themselves well to either a situation where you're playing by yourself or you're accompanying a vocalist or a soloist in a duet situation. And that's because they're so warm. When you use those wound strings and the root is either on the E and the A string, you've got those deeper, warmer sounds, right? That helps support the harmony much more effectively when you're by yourself, rather than when you're with a band with another guitar player or a keyboard player. When there's a lot of harmonic information flying around, that's when you want to use those altered triads to sort of be able to really sort of fine-tune where you are harmonically in the mix. But when you're playing alone or with a vocalist or with another soloist, these voicings are very, very, very useful. Let me show you how they work. All right, let's get started. These are going to be proxy voicings. We're going to be approximating a four-part chord with three voices. So much like those altered triads, these are ways to sort of approximate a four-part chord. There are three types of chords we're going to be using today. We're only going to be looking at major 7, minor 7, and dominant 7. The major 7 is root 3, 5, 7. The dominant 7 is root 3, 5, flat 7. And the minor 7 is root flat 3, 5, flat 7. Those are the only three types we're going to use today. This system and this methodology can be used to make other chords, but we're just going to focus on those three because it's going to make it easier for us to just attach this and get this information into our hands. For those three chords, there are two different libraries. A library that has the root on the E string and a library that has a root on the A string, just like bar chords. Both of these libraries feature a consistent architecture. We're only going to be using the root, the third, and the 7 of these chords, so we're going to be dropping the 5th in all these examples. But both of these libraries, the E string library and the A string library, are going to feature the 3rd and the 7 on the D and the G strings. And as you'll see when I show you how to use these, the function of the D and the G string will swap back and forth. Now this may sound all confusing, but I'm going to clear it up as we get going. And here we go. We're going to start with the root on the E string. And we're going to start on A just because it's A. I don't know, it's just a nice place to start. The E string root will always have the 7 on the D string and the 3rd on the G string. And I'm just going to play an A major scale to show you where those tones lay out. Here's the root, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Root, 2, 3. So root, 7, third. So we're not having any information at all on the A string. And I'll show you why that is here when we get to the A string roots. So let's just take a moment here and turn this chord into our 3 different chord types. Major 7, root 3, 5, 7. We're not going to be using the 5, so this is root, 7, 3. The next form of chord is dominant 7, root 3, 5, flat 7. So root, flat 7, 3. Just take that 7 down a half step and you have a dominant chord. Our third type is minor 7, root, flat 3, 5, flat 7. We're not going to use the 5th. Just take that third down a half step and you have your minor 7 chord. And again, we're omitting the 5th. So major 7, 7 down a half step, dominant 7, third down a half step, minor 7. That's it. That's all 3 of them right there. Let's jump over to the A string. This is where we're going to have our root for the next library of chords. These are going to have the 3rd and the 7 on the D and G string, but they're going to swap. The 3rd is always going to be in the D string, and the 7 is always going to be on the G string, and I'll show you that with a major scale. Here's D, right, because it's the root on the A string. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there's our first chord, major 7. Root 3, 5, 7. This is root 3 and 7 because we're omitting the 5th. Turn this into a dominant chord to take it to root 3, 5, flat 7. Just take that 7 down a half step. Right? Now we've got root 3, 7. Again, we're omitting the 5. Just take a moment. You might recognize this as the bottom end of your Hendrix chord. It's a dominant chord. The Hendrix chord just adds a sharp 9 to it. Little diversion, but it's always good to attach stuff to information that you might already have. We're at the dominant chord. To turn this into a minor 7 chord, we want root, flat 3, 5, flat 7. So we just take the 3rd down a half step. And we have a minor 7 chord. Again, now it's root, flat 3, flat 7. And again, we're kicking the 5th out because we really don't need it. So here are our 3 voicings for the A string root. Major 7, dominant 7, minor 7. So that's it. Very, very simple. 3 voicings for the root on the A, 3 voicings for the root on the E. Very easy to keep track of. Just like bar chords, right? Major, minor, dominant, major, minor, dominant. Having that root in the E and the A string just allow us to keep track of it and move it through chord progressions. So I just want to show you one more thing about chord progressions and how to use this. In an instance where we've got a chord progression, let's say a 2, 5, 1 progression in the key of G. 2 is A minor, 5 is D, and 1 is G. Just using triads, we'd be looking at A minor, D, and G. But with 4-part chords, we have to add that 7. So the 2 is A minor 7, the 5 is D7, and the 1 is G major 7. So let me show you how that works with these kernel chords. Here's our A minor 7, D7, and G major 7. But I want to show you how these other voicings work. The root just moves like this. I'm going to put that in the looper pedal. Now listen to the rest of the chord. 2, 5, 1, and G. Just listen to these other voices and watch what happens. Let's just take a listen to that for a second. On the A, this is the 7. On the D, it moves down a half step and becomes the 3rd. And then for the G, it stays there and becomes the 7 again. Listen to the G string. So on the A, it's the minor third, stays there for the D, but now it's the 7, the flat 7 of the D. Then it moves down a half step and becomes the third of the G. Now that's why we have the 7 and the 3 here. And as the root moves from the E and the A string, the functions of these two strings, the voices on these two strings, swap back and forth. It's incredibly useful. Now, to practice this and to get it down, clearly you want to go back and you want to get the libraries down, right? Major 7, dominant 7, minor 7 with the root on the E string. Major 7, dominant 7, minor 7 with the root on the A string. But then look at this. If we're going to do that 2, 5, 1 and G, I've got two places to do that, right? I start with the A minor to the D7 to the G major 7, but I could do that way up here, right? Look at this. A minor 7, D7, G7. A minor 7, D7, G7. Just like bar chords, A minor, D, G, you could do that up here. A minor, D, G. So they function exactly like bar chords. They're very easy to understand once you get them under your fingers. In order to practice these and really get them down, get your library together and then take them around the circle of fifths. Maybe just each voice around the circle of fifths. So take your minor 7 around the circle of fifths, your dominant 7 around the circle of fifths, the major 7 around the circle of fifths, or do 2, 5, 1s around the circle of fifths. So in other words, if we were going to start on C, 2, 5, 1 would look like this. Right? That's D minor 7, G7, C7. You can do that in two places, right? You can go like this. Same exact chords. Then around the circle of fifths, you do the same thing for G. You can do that in two places. And so on and so on. So the circle of fifths and that kind of exercise is the way you want to really drill these in and get them under your fingers and super useful. Okay, there they are. Some really nice voicings for these major, dominant, minor 7 chords, these 4-part chords that are a bit more sophisticated, more harmonically dense, and yet we can map them to the E and the A string, so we can move them around in chord progressions very, very easily, because those two strings are really the first strings we use and the first strings we sort of learn how to use using that bar chord functionality, right? Sort of moving those chord progressions around with the root just bouncing from and moving along the E and the A strings. So if you need some more time with this or you need some more reference material, I've tabbed this all out and that's on my Patreon page. That's linked in the description below if you need them. So head on over there if you need the tabs. Any support over there is greatly appreciated. I hope this helps. Just taking these ideas around the circle of fifths, perhaps, doing 2, 5, 1s around the circle of fifths like I demonstrated in the demo, that gives you an amazing reference point for the fretboard. It really is additive. It really brings you some more, context on how the fretboard works. I find these chords extremely useful in very, very specific cases. And again, the application sounds like a jazz application, and so if you're not a jazz player and you don't like jazz, I would challenge you anyway to really dive into these, take them around the circle of fifths, just get to know them. It'll expand your ears a little bit, but you don't have to necessarily become a jazz player. But in the blues specifically, dominant blues and minor blues, these are extremely useful chord voicings to have. I hope you enjoy them. I hope you get a lot of use out of them. I'll see you next time.